Hello and welcome back to Sunday Vibes, everybody. The sun is out, Mikey's legs are out, shorts on. Obba's got the summer vibes. Obba, you're back on the channel. It's been a little while.
It has been, man. And
how are you?
I'm good. Chelsea are doing a lot better, so there's a smile on my face. Yeah, come on, that's how they brought me on. But yeah, everything's been good. Season's coming to an end. Good vibes. The shorts. I almost wore shorts. I'm not gonna lie to you. But then you know me. Like, I've just stopped wearing long johns, so I need to keep it calm a little.
To be fair, it was a wintry spring, wasn't it?
Yeah, so exactly.
I sympathise a little bit.
And how's it been recently? Content creating for Sky. You've been doing interviews plenty.
It's been good. I started we started a new strand called The Playbook, where we asked players for advice. Got Antoine Semenyo on the first episode, and he was really good.
A little clip of that.
And then we've
having a great season as well.
Yeah, he is. And then we got Iwobi and Bassi on for the next episode, and they were just like jokes. So yeah, look out for that one because that's gonna be funny.
Coming soon. Mikey, you okay?
Yeah, I'm good.
Enjoyed the Champions League in midweek?
Very much enjoyed the Champions League midweek. Yeah. I think,
did you?
You know, I did. But it's funny. I was thinking this could be, it's small sample size, but there's a lot of chat about, the away goals rule making ties more interesting, and I think it has in many respects. But I do think this season, at least, the scrapping of the away goals rule has meant the first legs have been really entertaining. Second legs, not as much. I do feel like even Real Madrid Bayern yesterday. Let's say Real Madrid Bayern, but the second leg of the PSG Dortmund game, the first half was pretty dire, I thought, but amazing to see Dortmund go through. Obviously, Real Bayern last night. I mean, we probably need to speak about Real Bayern, don't we? I mean,
absolutely.
How on earth did Thomas Tuchel throw that away?
It's deep, man.
Do you have it down as that?
I think he threw it away.
I don't anymore.
I know Kane was injured and everything, but
it's tough because when you see your team getting dominated, you always think, or in the back of your head, you're thinking, if I'm a manager, I'm gonna do something to make us more attacking, or just do something that isn't super defensive. But in reality, when you're seeing Real the way they were and the way Vinny was killing Kimmich, you're gonna do something. You're gonna do something to make yourself more defensive. And to be fair, it wasn't necessarily
the Kim sub wasn't too bad actually.
It wasn't even the subs. I'm sorry, Neuer had a great game, but he cost them that game. It was literally down to Neuer. We can say anything about the subs and Kane coming off, but Neuer, the moment and then the throw that was go to extra time. Why are you forcing it? And then man. So I don't put it down to Tuchel. I just think Real Madrid, man, the magic that they have for that cup is just crazy.
Yeah, the late goals FC. They've done it for years now, particularly in that 2022 season. They were absolutely remarkable in that late goals against Chelsea, and then that incredible final 10 minutes against City as well. I thought massive props to Dortmund in particular. They were my story of the week, to be honest. I think the amount of pressure they were under. Yes, PSG hit the post, hit the woodwork 6 times in that tie, but I thought Hummels and Schlotterbeck were amazing in that tie. And Mbappe was really quiet.
He needs to. I know he's gonna go Real, but bro, you got to look back on your time. Yeah, not fraud watch. That's not the headline. I still think he's the best player in the world, but in those games, you expect those players to have those moments.
Yeah.
And he just didn't seem fully up for it. If you know the way Vinny was going at Kimmich, you could tell he was telling the players, "Give me the ball." He was taking the throw-ins quick, get me the ball to just go at him. Didn't really see that from Mbappe, and you'd expect that from those type of players. So a bit disappointed in his performance in that game.
It was some of the lesser-known players, I think, in the semi-finals that really stepped up. I thought Ryerson had a really good tie against PSG. I thought Konrad Laimer has had an excellent Champions League campaign as well.
Vitinha as well.
Vitinha was brilliant for PSG.
Really
so shout out all of them. But Dortmund Real Madrid final. I'm personally a little bit disappointed. I wanted a Der Klassiker final. I feel like I just can't really see an upset, which is what you're invested in that. I mean, Obba, do you kind of agree?
Yeah, there's no upset happening unless unless Dortmund score first. But even at that, the storyline,
Real Madrid have already shown that it doesn't matter.
Come back. Yeah, I don't see Dortmund doing it, but it's a great story for them to get there in the first place. I would love to see Sancho have a great game regardless, though.
Yeah,
because that would just be beautiful.
That would be.
I don't know. Hummels and Royce, they're still hurting from 2013 back at Wembley.
It's a different Real team, though.
It's a different. Well, yeah, it is a different Real team.
And it's a worse Dortmund team.
A worse Dortmund team, yeah, but that didn't stop Dortmund beating a pretty good Atleti team. It didn't stop them beating a pretty good PSG team in the semis.
That team weren't good, man. That PSG team were not good. They're not made for it yet.
PSG team in general this season have been quite good. Like, they're still quite a good team. I don't know. Real Madrid, like, they have been great in the last 2 Champions League ties, generally speaking, but they haven't been, over the course of the season, I don't think they've been that convincing.
Yeah, I get you.
They're still not at the level that they will be in a year or two's time, when they've got probably Alphonso Davies and Mbappe in that side. Like, they can still be got at defensively. I did find it kind of mad how high they were pressing Bayern Munich in that second leg. Like, I've not really seen that from a Real Madrid team. So it'll be interesting to see whether they do that to Dortmund, or whether they take a more counter-attacking approach, which I could see happening as well, given that Dortmund can be a bit susceptible to counter-attacks. So yeah, it'll be an interesting one. I don't know. I'm not going to say it's going to be.
So you're sitting on the fence.
It ain't over yet.
I don't think it is over yet. I think, Dortmund are capable of upsets this year.
And not many people gave Inter Milan a chance of upsetting City last year, and they ran that close. They were really good in that.
True.
Yeah.
I think
they're probably the better team.
And
it's
tight this year, 100%.
Yeah, I think the hardest team to assess right now, I think, is PSG, because I think it's quite a weak Ligue 1, I should say.
Yeah.
This year, with Marseille and Lyon having difficult seasons, and they were really close to exiting at the hands of Barcelona, who haven't been great this year either. That red card really changes it in that, and then just fading to get really. They were dominant against Dortmund, but without really creating too many clear-cut opportunities.
Yeah.
They hit the post a number of times, but they were from sort of wide ranges or long ranges. I don't know. Disappointing for Enrique, but it's good to see that they are going to stick by him and probably sign another 10 players this summer.
The easiest run to the final as well.
Yeah, exactly. That is true.
For PSG side, they've had much tougher runs, so they'll be disappointed in that for sure.
Speaking of disappointments, let's talk about Man United. It's about time. We haven't done a specific Man United one in a little while, but obviously they have been the big story in the Premier League this week, following that humiliation at the hands of an excellent Crystal Palace side on Monday. Props to Crystal Palace.
Yeah,
but obviously the headline is Man United and the future of Erik Ten Hag and who could potentially replace him, because there are loads of rumours flying around, and we are going to assess 3 candidates each. We're going to bring to the table 3 candidates. We might have the same ones, but we'll talk them through about who could replace Ten Hag this summer. But before we get into that, Mikey, I suppose let's just take us through where you're at with Ten Hag. Is he finito?
It feels like it's the last days of Ten Hag, doesn't it? I think it would be a strange move for Jim Ratcliffe and co to keep him on at this point, when they've just come into the club. They want to put their own stamp on the club, and the feeling around Ten Hag, amongst the fans, is that he's probably run his race at United. It would surprise me at this point if they did keep him on. Like, stranger things have happened, and maybe they've had a big plan for him, but everything seems to be pointing towards United sounding out replacements. What does surprise me a little bit is that there hasn't been anything particularly concrete getting through to the press about who United want next, because it is 2 weeks until the FA Cup final. Like, that's going to be probably at Ten Hag's last. That's the reason why it's a bit quiet. Maybe it is, and maybe they're just happy to have a manager come in, in July, and that be it, and have a bit of a stunted pre-season, and accept that the first season's going to be, not the most well prepared for. But if you're planning for the summer, if you're planning for signings, like, you kind of need to know who's going to be in place, and that concerns me a little bit, that I feel like come the end of August, there's a chance that United might be scrambling a little bit again, because they just haven't had time to plan for a particular manager. So that would be my concern. But equally, you need to give Ten Hag the FA Cup final. You don't really want there to be too much noise around him. You don't necessarily want a Van Gaal situation in 2016, which was pretty brutal. But so it's a difficult situation in that sense.
If he wins, does it change anything?
United
don't think so. I don't think so. It did. I mean, it didn't for Van Gaal, did it?
Easier to say goodbye, I would say.
I mean, leave on a high.
I think it's tough, man. Like, I hear why there's so many people saying Ten Hag has run his course here, because some of the results have been quite damning.
A lot of the results have been quite
damning.
More so the results is the performances, really.
Performances, yeah.
I
agree.
Like that 4-0 against Crystal Palace could have happened against a number of clubs this season. Like, Onana's bailed out United in a number of those kinds of games. United have just got lucky in a number of games.
Nearly lost an FA Cup semi-final, having been 3-0 up.
Yeah. It was really the Coventry game that did it, wasn't it? Like that was the telling game, I think, in terms of where this team is at.
I'm not sure how it went from how he finished last season to where we are now. And obviously, I think the biggest thing is he's not been able to pick his strongest side, whether we like to admit that or not, whether we like to say, he should be able to adapt and change the system, whatever. That is a big factor. Definitely. Yeah. So I'm just thinking in my head, like, I still think Ten Hag is a good manager, but I think what has really let him down is how he's handled the media, like the pressure of these type of situations, because as fans, really and truly, all you want to hear is like something to believe in. And I don't think when Ten Hag's saying, we play the most expensive football and like we've got a good team and all of this stuff, it's like you're not seeing what we're seeing type thing. So that's where I feel like the disconnect has happened. But I still feel like there's a bit of me that feels sorry for him, because I think if he does get all his players back and a hierarchy above him that makes sense and they know what they're doing, he could do better.
For sure. I think if Ten Hag was still at Ajax now, and or say and this new structure came in, then Ten Hag would be one of the first names on the list to become new United manager. But the timing's not been right in that sense for him, and I do feel for him, mainly in terms of the job that he was given. He came into a United that was supposed to be changing, that you had Rangnick at the club saying how the club needed to change.
Open heart
surgery. For months. A club that had got in, John Murta into a kind of football director position, and that at least on the surface was saying that it was going to change how they were operating, and clearly did not change at all. And I think it was all in that first summer. Yes, the Casemiro signing really worked last season, but clearly hasn't worked long term. The money spent on Anthony, I think, has been defining. Has been actually defining for him in terms of what that meant for United's ability to conduct transfer business from that moment forward, and obviously the failure of that signing. This is the problem, is that if you give the manager that kind of power to make those kind of signings, then when they don't work out, it does come back on the manager. Unfortunately, it does. And I would not have. I didn't. I don't think anyone really wanted Ten Hag to be in charge of transfers. I'm not sure he even really, would have wanted that. Well, maybe he did, but I don't think it was in his best interests to have control over transfers, given the size of the job. Aside from that he was taking on at United, and I think that's basically been it. I think that's been it. Like, sadly, he was without, by far his best signing, Lisandro Martinez, for basically the entire season, and the defence has been the big problem.
81
and the
goals
defensive
conceded.
structure, crazy. The defensive structure, but this is where I don't necessarily feel too sorry for him in terms of the injuries, because I think for the first half of the season, I think it's a good, I think it's a very legitimate mitigating factor. It is still a mitigating factor, but at the same time, I think if you're a certain calibre of manager, you are able to steady the ship in some way, shape or form.
Facts.
I know there's been 28 different defensive backline combinations. Like, that is outrageous, and I would be surprised if any other club in the Premier League has had the same. Like, Casemiro and Johnny Evans as a back two obviously is going to be a disaster. But having said that, like, you just think like you would trust Ten Hag to come up with something better, or to have stabilised United's defensive structure a bit better at this stage. And whether you like it or not, like whether the signings have paid off or not, most of them haven't. Like, there has been investment. Like, there has been enough investment to make this United team better than they currently are. Like, they should be challenging for top 4. They finished 3rd last season. Even if United's position last season was probably a bit better than performances were, like, there was a sign that things were getting better. And they've obviously dropped off massively this season. May well finish with their lowest ever Premier League points tally. It's just hard to justify keeping him. The only situation in which they should keep him is that there's really no decent candidates out there. But I think there are 2 or 3 decent candidates out there.
On the topic of which,
or at least one.
Welcome to Sunday Vibes, where we discuss those candidates. Let's kick off with the one that is talked about, particularly on Twitter, and actually, credible sources as well, that I don't think anyone is going to suggest. But Gareth Southgate is a name in the hat for this job.
Yeah.
Obba, you're a big England fan. You've watched a lot of Gareth Southgate's England. Do you think he's the right man to replace Ten Hag?
It depends on the length of the contract. Actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know why? Yeah.
More positive than I thought.
No, the reason I say that is because if you were to say in a scenario where they're not able to get some of the suggestions that we're going to say now, and they were saying, okay, cool, we need someone to steady the ship, someone that comes in with vibes that will has similar vibes to a suggestion I have actually.
Okay.
But we know what he did to that England squad when it was really down and out. Like, no one believed in the squad. No one believed in England getting to semis or to finals. The players were there, but there was just no stability. There was no good vibes around the whole team. He's completely changed that to the point where people are going into the competition saying England should win the Euros, England should win the World Cups. And obviously international football is different. But I think with what Manchester United are going to try to do, and even if you put all of their players that are at the club right now, if they were all fully fit and you brought in a few more players, it would still be a team that is challenging for European spots. I think someone that comes in with that type of energy, similar to how he did for England, wouldn't be the worst thing. I'm not saying that it is something that they should look to do if there's other managers available. But I can see
so you don't
why.
think it's crazy having him on the list?
I don't think it's crazy, but I think it's crazy for that to be their first choice. Do you know what I mean? I don't think he's a first choice type of.
Yeah, I'd be quite disappointed if this brand new regime comes in, with the best minds in sport, really. I mean, David Brailsford has dominated in a number of sports. Helped out Team GB becoming the best cycling team, etc. They are really, top minds. To get a company as big as Ineos that successful, but even the work they've done at Nice, and their first decision is to sack Ten Hag and replace him with Gareth Southgate, a manager who hasn't managed a club game for 14 years, I think. 14 years and 6 months since 2009 when he was fired by Middlesbrough with them 6th in the Championship. And yes, he had a difficult time at Middlesbrough. They consistently lost their best players. I mean, it's almost irrelevant even talking about what happened at Middlesbrough. It's so long ago.
It's a different time.
Different world.
It's
very different being sort of a player manager than manager at Middlesbrough to being the manager of Man United in a brand new era. And I don't think his record, even at England level, screams like good enough for Man United or good enough for where they want to go, really.
No, I hear that.
Look, he's done great at England, particularly culturally. His work as a spokesman, that's all brilliant. But Man United have struggled with a manager that got to a Champions League semi-final. They've struggled with a guy that dominated the Eredivisie. They've struggled with
two Champions
They've struggled
League
with
managers.
Jose Mourinho, one of the best managers in English football history, at least in this century. They've struggled with the player, the guy that knew the club better than anyone in Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. They've struggled with the legend in Louis van Gaal. Is Gareth Southgate the guy to fix it? I just don't think he's got the pedigree. And dealing with players every 3 months, the cream of the country every 3 months is very different to being put in charge of trying to right the ship that is Man United. I think it would be a disastrous move.
Yeah, I think when we talk about resetting the culture, it's so different, the job that he had with England. First of all, he came into the England job, he wasn't even, he came into the England job on an interim basis. So there was no pressure on him.
Yeah.
He was kind of just doing the FA a favour, essentially, when he came into that England job. He was taking on lots of players who knew him from being in the England setup already. through the work he'd done within the FA and within the England setup in the kind of early 2010s. He was able to bring through a new generation of players, and crucially, all with a very kind of specific goal about what it means to play for England, how to reset that specific culture. Like, everyone kind of had a common ground there. It's very different to taking over a dressing room where you've got players on inflated wages, players who've come in from abroad and haven't clicked yet in the Premier League, who are probably thinking, what is it in it for me here? Maybe thinking about their next move.
Yeah.
There's so many more variables when you're in a dressing room, especially one like United's, which has been, kind of either pretty rotten or kind of, trying to take away the rot at certain point, like at any stage over the last kind of 5 years. I think Southgate may well get swallowed alive in a job like that.
I know it's not that. See, I like him as a person, and I think it's just a different perspective. Like, just trying to see the reason and why he's linked.
You're not the
with this
first
job.
person to say it.
But that's what I'm saying.
I mean, Dan Ashworth, of course, him and Dan Ashworth have worked closely together before, so that's the only thing that I can really cling on to. But also,
there is an England core in that United squad that, if you get them all on side, that might change the tide a little bit. The Maguires, the Shaws, the Wan-Bissakas, Rashfords, like Kobe now. Like these are a core of players that you could see through the team. If you're able to get them into a place of believing in what he's trying to achieve, the rest of them, because of their leadership as well in the squad, it could work out.
Maguire has played his best football under him.
He has indeed.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with what you lot are saying, though.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay, that's Southgate. Get us with your thoughts. Let us know your thoughts in the comments section. Let's move on to our 3 suggestions. Do we want to start with our third choice and then go up? How do we want to do this?
Yes.
I
don't know. Or would you rather? I don't mind actually.
Let's go with the ones that we may have in common. So I'll say my first one. Okay. So this is who I think they should go for.
Sure.
And that is Thomas Tuchel.
Yeah.
I
Speak
think
from the heart, man. You've seen it.
Yeah, I think Thomas Tuchel is a great manager. I think he's had a bad year at Bayern Munich, but I think the state of Bayern Munich currently is in an interesting place. I think this is the most unstable I've seen them as a club in general. I've never seen them get rejected by so many managers, by so many players. So something's just not right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thomas Tuchel leaving Chelsea and obviously having some time off and then going to Bayern Munich, it seemed like it was perfect. Yeah. But then you see some of the trends that we saw in the last manager, Nagelsmann, where there were some players that do have more power than we've ever really seen at Bayern Munich. And I think that is almost worked against Tuchel this time, because he's not the type of manager that will say, oh, you've got the power, okay, I'm just going to submit. He's like, no, you're sitting on the bench. I don't think you're good enough. Yeah. And he will say that openly. But I still think he's a great manager. And I think what United need right now is stability. They need a manager that is flexible tactically. They need a manager that they can almost believe in. Like, because remember when Tuchel came into Chelsea, I think I was kind of reeling off of Lampard leaving at the time as well.
You were hurting.
But I was hurting, but I wasn't really like behind it like that. But I remember his first press conference when he said, I'm going to make us one of the hardest teams to defend against. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. As a fan, and as anyone that is connected to the club, you're going to be like, you know what? I might have to get behind this guy. I think that's
very charismatic, isn't he?
Very charismatic. And I think that's a skill he has that Ten Hag doesn't have. And
connecting with people.
Yeah, and I think with the current state of the United squad, I can't, even if he was to walk in right now, I can't see them losing 4-0 to Palace away. I just don't see that stuff happening with Tuchel, because he knows, okay, this is the current state of my squad. If I have to play 5 defenders, someone that's coming from the academy or a right winger that I know can play defensively well, you're going right back. Like, do you know what I mean? He's that type of manager. So
he'd be more pragmatic. I think Ten Hag just doesn't adapt at all.
Completely.
To different games, to different game states. I feel like he's so stuck in his ways of this one sort of counter-attacking but massively open system. Like, Tuchel just, the spaces at Chelsea, they defended so well as a unit.
Exactly. And I think that's why, like, all of the things that I've said about what he done at Chelsea, yes, it didn't go well at the end, but I'm not going to blame that solely on him, because we know everything that happened with the club around the time that he was leaving. So I think he loves England. He spoke about his time in England. He's leaving Bayern Munich at a time where, you know, Leverkusen have done incredibly well. In other years, Bayern would still win the league. So, yeah, I think he's probably not going to want time off, and that seems like the perfect opportunity for him.
Yeah, I think he'd be really hungry. And whereas you look at, if we're comparing these candidates as we go along, you know, Southgate being in international management or the under-21s for 15 years, Tuchel's been working at various different clubs, like establishing Mainz as a mid-table Bundesliga clubs, then going to Dortmund, getting their, I think, second highest points tally this century at Dortmund, winning a DFB Pokal, getting to a Champions League quarter-final. You know, that was impressive at Dortmund. Going to PSG, I think they won a domestic treble, nearly won the Champions League, lost in the final of that. Yeah, it was a slightly weird year with COVID, but still had to win one-legged ties, which actually gives you almost less leeway. Yeah, and he still got to the final there. I think at Chelsea, his work there was exceptional, given the circumstances. You know, finals of every competition, I think. Won that Champions League with a really difficult run as well. Atletico Madrid, Real Madrid, then Man City. And then even at Bayern Munich, yes, it hasn't gone perfectly, but it's been a season where there's been so much change above him. He's come into a club that didn't get the players that he wanted to, whether they were the right players or not. He didn't get the signings he wanted to. And they still ended up with the best attack in Europe. He still got so much out of Harry Kane. And yeah, I think what you say is right about not necessarily getting along with some of the key characters in that squad, but he still introduced Pavlovic and it got him to a level. Like Musiala's had a solid-ish season. You know, he's got great production out of Leroy Sané at various points this season as well. He's shown it in the Champions League, getting past Arsenal again, overturning that defeat to Lazio as well. He's an expert in European football, and he wouldn't even be playing European football most likely at Man United next season. Tuchel with 45 games per season, depending on how deep you go in the cups, I think United could do really, really well. I think he'd hit the ground running. He loves working there, and as Sam says, he's really charismatic and he's tactically flexible as well. I think it would be, given where United are right now, it feels almost like winning the lottery to get a manager of Tuchel's standard.
And the Bayern fans don't want him to leave. No. They stayed at the end of the game last night. Every time that he came out, they were cheering for him. And that just doesn't happen. So that's either they're worried about what's going to come next, because there's not that many top managers left in the market. No. And it could go terribly wrong, them letting him go. So yeah, I think he's quality.
Yeah, Bayern have become a circus in that sense. I think the whole handling of him, even the handling of Nagelsmann last year, just so far off the level we're used to with Bayern, isn't it? I don't really have much. I feel like you two have covered it pretty well, but I think with Tuchel, given that he does have a bit of a reputation for you know, sometimes rubbing up against hierarchies the wrong way, and being quite stubborn, and he has fallen out with ownerships before. Having said that, he is pretty, he does tend to stay in jobs around 2 years at a time. He left he left PSG under a cloud just a few months after leading to that Champions League final, but that's because of the fallout with Leonardo. Obviously the Burley thing with Chelsea, I think he would have probably had at least another season there were it not for those disputes. And like you say, he's just done it. He's done it at multiple big clubs. He's been able to come into dressing rooms which were potentially problematic, and has been able to get a tune out of sometimes quite disjointed dressing rooms. He managed to get Neymar and Mbappe to press more than they'd ever done in their life. That's a pretty big achievement. That's something that I would not,
because they stopped ever since.
If he can get Mbappe to do it, then I think he can probably get Marcus Rashford to do it. You know what I mean? I think that's what I love about Tuchel, is that it's that ability to adapt, it's that ability to take a team and get them playing in a way that actually people might not necessarily think they were capable of doing before, but always doing it, building from the back up. I think one stain on him, I guess, is Bayern's defensive record this season hasn't been very good, and generally speaking, I feel like with Tuchel, especially post Chelsea, that his ability to get a team playing really good defence-first football is something that I think makes him ideal for a job like United, where the structure has just been so poor. That would worry me slightly, but when you're just looking across his career, there are just so many positives from each job that if even there were 3 aspects of what's made him good at certain clubs were to be true, for him coming to United, I think it makes him the ideal candidate.
Yeah. He also, I feel like he sort of loves being the underdog role.
Yeah.
Like even PSG, fine, that's not an underdog role, but the way they're viewed around Europe, it's still a little bit of an underdog
100%.
role. Bayern is the first job where he's expected to win, and yeah, it didn't happen, but I wouldn't judge him too harshly on that.
And also like the PSG but Bayern maybe less so. But the PSG job, is one that you take and you have to set yourself up for failure. And he's probably been the most impressive PSG manager of the Qatar era. I would argue.
Sure,
maybe some
sure.
people would say that Laurent Blanc
Maybe
did a really good job. But I think in terms of the way that PSG were playing, and certainly what they almost achieved. I think he was the outstanding guy. But should we move on from Tuchel? Because I feel like are we all in agreement? Are we all in agreement?
He's the top.
One?
Yeah,
I don't
he's top.
think there's any
So I've
point.
kind of got a wild card,
Okay.
and a kind of.
I've got a wild card as well.
I think they're both pretty wild, actually.
Okay.
Oh, but do you want to go with your wild card first?
Well, we're doing wild cards right now.
Oh, wait. What? How have you? Who's your third option?
So this is my second option is
Let's do second
if they
option.
don't get Tuchel.
Okay.
So it's a wild card, but it's not at the same time because we've seen what he's been able to do in the Premier League, and I feel like he's looking for that step up, and that is Roberto De Zerbi.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think he is proven that he's a quality manager, but I think he's gone as far as he can with Brighton. And I don't necessarily think that would have been the case if they were able to keep the players that he was able to achieve so much with last season. But this time around, I think he's struggled. We understand why. They've had injuries. The players that they brought in, Dahoud and Milner to replace McAllister and Caicedo is crazy now that we can say in hindsight because we've seen it just didn't work out.
Some people said at the time. Some people took a lot of flack from Brighton fans.
Yeah, they did. But
Gotta sometimes celebrate your
but
W's.
you know what it is? It's because we thought that system was just going to continuously work because they were able to find gems and get people working that we wouldn't think would work. But this year they've had those players not working. They've had a few injuries as well to key players, and I feel like he's just getting drained as the season goes on. We're seeing the last few games, they've not really been that great. They could still get European football, but it's going to be a tough ask. And I think he needs that step up. If United might be too far up, but at the same time, that's why he's my second option. Because if they don't get Thomas Tuchel, they're going to want someone that has experience in the Premier League, that has charisma, that is tactically versatile because he's proven that at Brighton, but also someone that is hungry to prove that he belongs at that stage. I think at Brighton there was points, especially in some of the interviews where they're talking about, some of the games he went up against United, Liverpool, City. They spoke to him about where Brighton are and what they want to achieve. And sometimes I'd look at him and he's like slightly taking it as like do you not know who I am type of thing. I'm still a big boy manager, and I think he wants to be seen as that. So I put him forward for Bayern Munich the last time I was on the show, and I think for United,
would it worry you at all, like the drop off this season? I know you've mentioned the transfers, but their form recently hasn't been great.
Not really. I think it's tough when you look at
as well.
The injuries have really shagged them. Like you need consistency at any club, like especially where you're fighting to be in the European spots. The only clubs that we can say a few players coming out of the side won't affect them as much is maybe one or two sides. But for Brighton, if you're losing, who is someone that has had an up and down? What's his name? I always say it wrong.
Estupinian.
Estupinian. There we go. Like he was such a key player for them the season before. This year he's been in and out.
Mitoma too.
Mitoma as well. And these were players that we're talking about. They could go for big sums in the summer. They stayed, but they didn't really kick on, and they're probably thinking, okay, that happens. But for him, losing those players, it's going to have an effect on how your team performs. So I think if he's able to have a team where they're challenging for European spots, similar to what he did at Brighton first year, they're going to get in top class players, not players that are kind of the gems of Europe and stuff. I think he could do really, really well. But it just takes a club to almost take a leap and say, we're gonna back you and trust that you can take that jump.
Yeah.
You don't think he can? Damn, you lot
I
don't think he
almost
can?
worry. This seems strange, but I almost prefer him to take over after Pep than after Ten Hag.
Really? Why?
I feel like
You need to structure
joining
around
a
him.
club which has gone through all the upheaval that United have, that have played so badly this year, his football is quite risky, and I can just see. I feel like Ten Hag tried to play out from the back quite a lot in his first year, and then kind of changed his system a little bit because he just realised he didn't quite have the players to, or it was going to be
He
such a
changed
painful.
it within weeks.
Yeah, it was going to be such a painful adaptation that he was just like, I can't take the flack. I feel like De Zerbi also arrives with. It's all about leeway when you get a new manager in. Like, how much leeway are you willing to give them? Like, Tuchel comes with a lot of credentials. De Zerbi's coming off a really difficult season at Brighton. How long is it before, the Mario memes start going around if United start badly? And the football could be quite painful at points. Like, Brighton have been really open at various points this year. I think he's got a huge future, but I prefer him with a squad that are more accustomed to that style of play, which is why I think he's more likely. He'd be a better fit right now for City, but he's just not at that caliber.
He
he
almost
needs
someone,
another year.
Yeah, he's almost like I had
interesting.
I had De Zerbi as my third choice, but I wouldn't really want to hire him, mainly because he's almost the manager you hire maybe in 2 years' time for United. Once there's once the new regime have actually had time to settle and the players have actually come in. I think that was the thing. He inherited a Brighton side which were already doing very, very well under Graham Potter, and he was just able to take them to a new level. That was a Brighton side that had been put in place largely by Dan Ashworth and that team. And I think really more so than injuries, actually, it was last summer. I think Brighton's entire recruitment department's pretty much been poached over the last 2 years.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
And and I mean, and by Newcastle as well. But like, I think that was the key. I think De Zerbi's first summer, having way less in terms of what Graham Potter had, and in terms of being able to renew that squad when key players left, and the sheer scale of the departures, I think was always going to come back and bite him a little bit. So that does worry me a little bit that he'd be coming to a United setup where, let's face it, they're not going to be able to land all their top targets this summer. They've got to watch their spending, and there's going to be potentially significant sales as well, and a lot of players to replace, especially in defence. Like, feasibly, United could lose like 3 defenders this summer, 3 centre backs this summer. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, and I feel like it would maybe be unfair to bring De Zerbi into that situation, given that he's yet to manage at a top club. Like Shakhtar Donetsk is probably the biggest club that he's managed before. Sassuolo were always punching above their weight. They've been relegated now. Brighton were always punching above their weight. There's less pressure, and they've also had one of the best recruitment departments, at least until now. That it would worry me a bit with De Zerbi. Having said that, I do feel like as a third choice, there aren't that many better out there. Like, I was looking at, say someone like Paulo Fonseca at Lille. I think he would be an outside shout, but lack of Premier League experience, had difficulties at Roma as well. I don't know whether how he would handle the pressure at United. Someone like Simone Inzaghi, obviously, it would be an outstanding candidate, but
not swapping into.
I just don't think he leaves Inter. It's just such a step down for him from
That's
Inter.
a huge step down.
I think,
I
think stylistically he would be amazing, and like, I think tactically his versatility would be great. Like, his what he achieved at Lazio as well was pretty remarkable. I would love Simone Inzaghi, but I just don't see him leaving Italy. So that kind of left me with De Zerbi as my third choice. So De Zerbi is my third pick. My pick between De Zerbi and Tuchel would be Ruben Amorim.
Ah, nice.
What were you?
That was the drum roll.
I thought that was like.
I couldn't get my fingers going in time.
He was in London the other day, no?
Sorry?
He was in London the other day.
What Amorim? Of course, to West Ham, yeah. And, he may well...
Oba went for dinner with him as well.
Yeah, I thought maybe you were trying to tap him up for Chelsea.
No
back on the pot chow.
The seesaw.
Yeah. But Ruben Amorim, I just think, again, it's not without its risks. And does he actually leave Sporting this summer? I'm not so sure. It does feel like, I know the West Ham talks and everything, but there's also a feeling that maybe he wants to really build a dynasty at Sporting CP. But
he apologised for those talks as well.
Yeah, he kind of got in a bit of trouble, didn't he? So, but I just think in terms of his pedigree, it's hard. Like he's going to have to go to he's going to have to kind of flee the nest at some point.
How old is
he? Because he's only 41 maybe, 41, 42.
Okay.
But like he only retired in 2017, didn't he? So maybe he is younger actually, but he has just achieved so much, and he's yet to slip up. That's the amazing thing is, he took that job with Braga's reserves, I think was it in 2019, and then I think won 10 games in a row with them. Took the senior job off the basis of that. Got a side that I think had been 16th at one point earlier in that season, and then they finished that season third. Francisco Trincao got that move to Barcelona off the back of that, I believe. Or was that in 2019? No, that was in 2020, wasn't it? So first of all, there's that, and then I think was it 10 million euros he cost to get out of that contract to Sporting CP, and first full season at Sporting to win the league with 85 points. I think they only lost their first game of the season on the second to last day when the league was all but sealed. Just really remarkable
Good
stuff.
Performances in Europe as well.
Yeah, very decent in Europe as well. I think they made it through that really tough group in 2022, ended up getting knocked out by Man City in the Champions League last 16, and also just the amount of players that he's helped. Joao Palhinha for one really became the player that he is today under in Amorim's system at Sporting before going to Fulham. Nuno Mensch now at PSG. Obviously, he has always had great raw ability, but that move doesn't happen, I don't think, without Amorim overseeing his development. Pedro Porro, again, like someone who had great ability but really came into his own as a wing back in his system. Look at someone like Victor Gyökeres this season. It's easy to say, you look at his abilities, and it's inevitable that he was going to be able to perform in the Liga Portugal, but it's not a given. And he has, developed into one of the best strikers in Europe under Amorim. This is a guy who's playing for Coventry last season. Like, no disrespect to Coventry, but why weren't the bigger clubs coming in for him then? You might argue that they should have been coming in for him then, but he's now, his value has quadrupled, and he was Sporting's the most expensive signing in Sporting's history. So I think you have to give Amorim so much credit for that. They've won a second league title in 4 years. I think he's only finished outside the top 3 in the league once in his young tenure. So in his managerial career. So in that sense, I think he would be a really exciting appointment for United. Again, he would be entering a really difficult,
toxic,
transitional situation at United, where he's. The first season probably would be quite difficult for him, but he's got a very clear style of play that has worked with the back 3 wing backs that I think would suit, say someone like Maguire, who probably, is one of the defenders who definitely will stay at the club this summer. There would be, it would take adaptation for some of the other players, but that's not to say that he can't adapt like he has done before. I just think his tactical work, his ability to go deep in competitions, I think it would be certainly an interesting appointment. Again, not without its risks, but I don't think anyone who's not Thomas Tuchel would be without its risks, to be honest.
Okay, that's the case for Ruben Amorim. I've got 2 candidates. One is more wild than the other, but I think one is pretty unexpected as well. My first one that's a little bit unexpected, but I do think is a really high-quality manager, is Marco Rose.
Okay.
of RB Leipzig. He's got 1 year remaining on his contract. He says he's going to enter contract talks with Leipzig this summer, but he wants to check where the project is going. He doesn't want to lose his best players. Last summer, losing Gvardiol, losing Szoboszlai, losing Nkunku. He wants to check what's happening in this summer, because Xavi Simons is only there on loan. There's interest in Dani Olmo. And you get the impression that he doesn't want to be...
might be interested in Openda as well.
It might be an interest in Openda. That you get the impression that he doesn't want to be part of a club that consistently sells their best players year on year to the quantity that they did last summer, at least. And look, he took over early on last season of that Leipzig job after Tedesco was fired. I think they were 11th, finished in the top 4, obviously. They actually finished with the most points in the period that he was managing them that season, which is pretty remarkable. And I think they had the best defensive record too. I think they had 1 more point than Bayern Munich. Even this year, despite losing all that talent, they are still 4th in the Bundesliga. They had a really good Champions League run as well. They are much more competitive in games against Man City, who thrashed them last year when they reached the knockout. And then they put up a really good fight against Real Madrid in the last 16 as well. I thought they were really unfortunate, particularly that second leg. They were really, really close to knocking out a side that have subsequently reached the final. He's got amazing production out of Openda. Benjamin Sesko's being linked with big moves as well. And they probably, for the first time in a while, don't necessarily have as much star quality as they have in previous years, and yet he's still got them to be super competitive. And it's not just the 4 players that he sold last summer, or the 3 players he sold last summer. He's also lost Halstenberg. He's lost 6 of his 11 most used players from last term. So that is a lot of change behind the scenes. And I think they've had a really, really good year. And in a different way to previous Leipzig bosses, Nagelsmann, etc., who was much more vertical, much more counter-attacking, much more counter-pressing. Marco Rose's football's a little bit more calm. It's a little bit more possession-based. And I think that's an easier adaptation to the Premier League. We saw Ralf Rangnick's football not necessarily work that well at Man United. So I think you are looking at a manager with a really high ceiling that is still a good age, pretty charismatic, speaks good English, and has a really good track record. Not just at Leipzig as well, because at Dortmund, I think he finished with their second highest point tally of the last 5 years, won the DFB Pokal there as well. Actually, sorry, at Leipzig he won the DFB Pokal. At Dortmund, though, really good year there. And then at Gladbach as well, reached the knockouts of the Champions League, finished 4th with the Gladbach side that have subsequently really struggled. So he did a really, really good work there. Even at RB Salzburg, finished with their best ever points tally. So there's a really high quality manager there who potentially, no one's really talking about it, but could be available this summer if he leaves RB Leipzig, and could well be tempted. Whereas a manager like Tuchel, I think, could have other attractive offers, to be fair. I think Marco Rose would probably see Man United as a nice step up before going on to a club at the top of the pyramid in a couple of years' time. So he was my slightly wild card suggestion, but not as wild as my third.
Who's your third?
Fine. Thomas Frank.
Okay.
Oh, that's not
Thomas
wild.
Frank.
That's not wild.
I know, your mate.
Yeah,
Your mate,
he's
Thomas Frank.
a great
You watch
guy.
Peaky Blinders together, don't you?
He loves it. I've never watched it, to be fair.
He's.
You haven't taken him up on his recommendation?
Nah,
a few months later.
Wow. I know it's
I
poor.
just thought of
I think he's a great manager.
all Premier League managers, I was kind of looking for a Premier League.
I think in some ways it's
suggestion.
less wild than Rosa, to be
Same,
honest.
I agree.
In some
Really?
ways.
Yeah.
Well,
He
I don't know.
just doesn't have
He's
Champions League experience, hasn't worked at a
he's very
big
comfy at Brentford.
budget.
He's very comfy
Comfy
at
at
Brentford.
Brentford. Also, I think he's done a really good job at Brentford. The amount of talent that they've lost over the years, disappointments in the Championship, losing a playoff final to Fulham, eventually going up via Swansea. Even in they're in their end of their 3rd year in the Premier League, their net spend's £124 million. Like Forest have spent nearly double that in 2 years in the Prem. And I know Forest are a unique example, but it feels like, he's lost across his entire tenure, like players like Mopé, players like Watkins, Ben Rama, who else is there? Eriksson came in for that brief stint as well. Like, they've consistently lost his better players pretty much every year.
And injuries
yes,
this year.
Injuries this year. And look at also, people, Man United fans will be like, look at the drop-off this year. Injuries, as Sam says, like Rico Henry, Norgard's missed games, Ben Mee's missed games.
Mbeumo.
Sorry?
Mbeumo as well.
Mbeumo, like, it's been a really difficult year. Tony have only fit from January, and yet he's made them comfortably safe again without nearly Kevin Schade missed a lot of games as well, without nearly the same standard of players available to him. Yeah. I think he's done a really good job in the Premier League. I'd love for him to be in the running for a top 6 job. Would Man United look at him? Maybe not. I don't know. It's a difficult one. That's why he's my third choice. But I think he does deserve a step up at some stage.
I agree.
Yeah, no, he definitely does. I think it's just whether it's also whether he would want to take that United. I don't know whether he'd take
surely he would.
It's a difficult one to take on. It's a difficult one to take on.
What's he rating for? Like Spurs?
Maybe Spurs.
He's not got to look at in the West Ham job. I thought West Ham. Why aren't West Ham looking at him?
Yeah,
or just a job where he can come in and make himself a bit comfier, a bit quicker. Like I think at United, he's not really going to have time to bed in. Like he's just not going to have time to bed in. I think again, it's like United in 2 years' time. I think would be a better shout. Like United now, like.
But does he have it
needs a
firefighter? Been at
Brentford
since
2019.
Does he want to stay? If the opportunity comes up, you take Man United.
Yeah.
Surely.
Yeah, it's just, but it's similar to even like with Amorim. It's like you need to be. You basically need to be prepared that you're going to be fighting fires for the first year, or maybe even the first 2 years.
Okay.
That you're going to be having to plug gaps.
Of all the suggestions we've mentioned, Tuchel's number one, I think, for all of us.
Yeah.
Which of the other suggestions do we think is number two?
I'd be
tempted by Marco Rose, but I feel like he's a little bit unrealistic.
I think De Zerbi.
I would still go with Amorim.
Remember we've said that some of the suggestions that we've said as well, like Inzaghi, we're not gonna.
Yeah, we didn't go super unrealistic.
Yeah.
Because
I don't think Marco Rosa is unrealistic. I think he's more realistic. I think United have a better chance of guessing Rosa than they do, say, Amorim. Like I think Marco Rosa is a bit outside the box in some ways. He's not a manager that people have been talking about. I think slightly. No, I don't mind it as a shout. I looked at him and I thought just because of the difficulties that he's had in previous jobs with Dortmund at Mönchengladbach, I just thought
he was solid at Dortmund. They got embarrassed I think that was the year they got really embarrassed in Europe, and I think that really counted against them. I think they lost heavily to Rangers.
But it's because he was part of that managerial merry-go-round that happened for about 18 months in the Bundesliga. It worries me in terms of his ability to like manage up at clubs and to deal with that kind of pressure that obviously comes with a job like United. That's the thing that counts against Rosa for me. Tactically, like no issue at all. Like he has proved himself very, very accomplished and able to adapt. Obviously came up through the Red Bull system, didn't he? So yeah, I do quite like that as an outside shout. In some ways, I think United, if you really want a culture change at United, maybe that's where you start with the managerial picks, not Southgate, not that wild, but maybe you do go a little bit under the radar. But it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because you have to you want to marry like changing United's approach as a club with the fact that it is still a club of that size, and you still do kind of need someone with gravitas to come in because it's not just the structure at the club that you're dealing with. It's everything else that comes with it. It's the media, it's the fans. The fans not so much actually, because the fans tend to be fairly forgiving with managers. But yeah, like the kind of commercial obligations, but mainly the media. It's mainly the noise that just surrounds United at all points. Draining. It is draining. Like we've seen it. Like even someone like Erik Ten Hag, who I think was able to prove doubters wrong when he was at Ajax, like had great pedigree and a very stubborn manager. Actually, in that first season at United, was able to reset the culture of that dressing room a little bit, and even he's been visibly broken by it. That's the problem with this job.
Did Ronaldo leave this season?
No,
last year.
Last year. That feels like
it's been a long 2 years, mate.
That's crazy. What I was going to say, my extreme wild card, and obviously we don't have to talk about it too much, but mine is if they weren't able to get any of the people that we've mentioned, he's not been in management since he left his last role, and that is Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. I think that it's a very wild shout.
You did tell me this off camera before. I was ready for it.
It's a very wild shout. The only reason I say that is because he's had to come into a similar environment in the past. He's done quite well. It would be similar to the reasons why I said Southgate could be a calm option if it was like a year to year, interim year to year.
You know
type
what
vibe.
happens? He gets a good result. Rio says, "Get it out."
No, but then
we're back to square one.
that's under the old regime. This new regime is like, okay, cool. We weren't able to get Thomas Tuchel, and we know that that was who our target was. We need someone to come in that knows the club, knows that almost has a mix of the new and the old. So it's not going too far from what they want the United, culture to be, but also that understands what they're trying to achieve and what this new hierarchy is trying to do. And I think he did quite well when he first came in. It didn't end up very well, but when you look back on it, the first 18 months of his reign wasn't that bad, bro. It wasn't that bad.
It's one of the high points.
I think there are plenty of moments throughout his United career, to be honest, which were quite good. Like the 2021 season, was pretty good as well. Aside from that Europa League final loss, I think Solskjaer did quite a good job, and the last 6 months were really, really terrible. But I can't do it. I can't even get anywhere near behind that.
Again. You again. You're still here.
Crazy.
Yeah, I think. I can't get behind that at all.
That's a wild card.
That's why it's a wild card.
That's why it's come in the final 2 minutes of this episode, where we have covered a lot of names. To be fair, guys, we want your thoughts. Crucially, do you think they should get rid of Ten Hag? And if they do, is Tuchel your favourite? Who's your second? Who's your third? Get all your thoughts on all the suggestions we've mentioned in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching Sunday Vibes for this week. We will see you again on Monday. We didn't do Monday Vibes last week because of bank holiday, but we are back on Monday. Big shout out to Oba for coming down and helping us out from his busy schedule.
Anytime.
And we'll catch you next week. Bye-bye.
Peace.